In this video, we're going to go back to our rusty metal material and we're going to start to apply some of the workflow theory that we talked about in Chapter 2. Now, if you've been following along with this series, in Chapter 1, this is where we left off. We created this rusty metal material, and this is the node graph that we created. We have our metal, we have our rust, and everything is composited into this single graph. So here in Chapter 3, we're going to start to talk about material blending. Now, in order to do that, in this Part 1 video, I'm going to show you how I would take a graph like this, and I'm going to break it into two basic materials. So this is going back to that Method 1 workflow that we talked about in Chapter 2's video. So if you want to follow along from this point, you can just download the project files from Substance Share. I've placed a link in the description of this YouTube video, and I'm also updating the Share Sites project for this series so that it will include all of the project files for each chapter that we continue to explore. So again, if you want to just start on the same page, you can just go to the Chapter 1 folder and just open metal.sbs. All right, so the first thing that I'm going to do is just create a new substance. So here we'll just go to File, New Substance. Now, in this case, I'm just going to choose this empty graph template. And for the graph name, let's just call this metal underscore floor. And size mode, we're going to leave relative to parent, and we'll click OK. So here we have this new metal floor graph. Now, first thing, I'll just go ahead and save. Okay, so here we have this metal floor. The idea is that we're just going to create a basic material. This is going to become a base material that we're going to use, and it's just going to cover this metal floor. So let's jump back to our original graph, and what I'm going to do for now is I'm just going to left click and select all these nodes, make sure I get everything, and I'm just going to hit Control-C to copy. And we'll go into this new substance, and here we'll hit Control-V, and we're just going to paste the nodes into here. So we're going to just start here from this new graph. Now it looks like for some reason it's bringing in an instance of that rusty metal graph, so I'm just going to select that and delete that node. So here I'll just double click one of the nodes here. You can see that it automatically computes all the thumbnails, and then here's what we are seeing in our 2D view. Let's make sure that we are viewing these outputs here in our 3D view. So I'm going to right click and choose View Outputs in 3D View. All right, so you'll notice that right off the bat, the rust goes away. And that is because if we zoom in here on this histogram scan, you'll notice that in the Chapter 1 walkthrough video, we had exposed this position parameter. So if I double click to go to the root level of my graph, you'll notice that, well, that input parameter isn't, it doesn't exist because we just simply copied the nodes into this new graph. So no problem, just wanted to let you know that that is what's actually causing that. We're going to delete these nodes anyways. So like I said, we want to concentrate on this just being the metal floor. So let's start here with this color. We've got these two color nodes, and then we were blending that here with our metal reflectance node. So let's just take this guy and output this straight to our base color. And so now we can take this gradient map, the hue saturation, and this blend, and we'll just simply select and delete them. So this is just our base color now. So we have this node here that's actually going to be our roughness. So we'll just zoom in, and we're going to start to just position these nodes. I'm going to clean things up a bit as well. So here is where I started to use this noise. Again, we covered this in Chapter 1, but we were using this noise, blending it, and then using a histogram. This was controlling the amount of rust that we had. We're not going to be using any of this anymore. So let's just take these nodes here. So the two, the noise, the warp, the blend, and this histogram scan, and delete. All right, so now we're getting something here in our 3D viewport. We're going to need to fix that here in just a moment. All right, let's come over here to where we have our noise in this histogram scan. And then here I had this grunge map processed with the levels, and it's going into this blend. And this blend is now outputting straight to my roughness, which is what I want. However, I'm just going to make a few changes here to this blend. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to leave the blending mode here at copy. I'm going to come over here to my opacity and just simply kind of lower this a bit. So now you can see that that's affecting my roughness here. And just lower this to maybe something around, I don't know, maybe close to 0.6. So now I'm just getting a blend between, this grunge map and this grunge map. Again, just variation is key when it comes to your roughness. And so this is the resulting grunge that we get. And I think this is going to work a bit better for me. Maybe I'll just play with this value a little bit. Let's just leave this at 0.5. All right, so now that we have that in place, we've got our roughness. Let's also take a look at our metallic. So we need to fix our metallic. We had this invert node just hanging out here now. Let's select and delete that. And what I'm going to do, since this is, again, just the metal floor basic material, it's a pure metal, let's hit the space bar, and let's just come down to where we have our uniform color, and we're going to set this to grayscale and move our slider here, our value slider, all the way to white, and plug this in. So we're basically saying this is a raw metal material. So we have a white value here for this metallic map. Now, one of the things that we can do while we're here is we can take a look at this uniform node, and we can see that, well, we're just using this to process just a single value, just white. And right now, at the default, if I just double click to get to my root level, base parameters, output size, we're at relative to parent. And as we discussed in chapter 1, that means that here in Designer, we're going to be working at a base resolution of 256 by 256. Well, I'll say the default resolution. So what we're essentially saying to the Substance Engine is, hey, we have this uniform color. We just need this single white value. Go ahead and process this at 256 by 256. So that's a waste, even at a small texture size of 256, for just this single value. You can also imagine when we instance this graph into another graph and then we compute it at, say, 2K. This uniform color, which is just going to be a solid white value, would then compute at 2K. Again, total waste in terms of optimization. So what we can do with this is take this node, and we're going to come over to the output size. So I have this node selected, output size. We're going to change it from relative to parent to absolute. And then we're going to switch this size all the way down here to where it says 16 by 16 pixels. And the reason we're using this is because 16 by 16 is the lowest value that we can choose that will work with this Substance GPU engine. So here we're just going to say Substance Engine, generate this texture 16 by 16, so it's very fast to generate, and it's this single color value. So that is one step to this optimization. However, when we take a look, you can see that that resolution is now getting passed along and being output here to our metallic. And later on, when we start to look at blending, that's going to cause us some potential issues. So we want to fix this. Well, if we select this node, you can see that, well, it's an output. We don't have any way to change the output size to this. So a simple fix, let's left click to select our connection line, and let's click this levels node just to automatically insert this levels in between. We'll select the levels. We'll change its output size from relative to input. Remember, we discussed this in the Chapter 1 series about resolution and how resolution is inherited. So we want to say, hey, levels node, I don't want you to grab the resolution from your input node. I want you to grab it from your relative to parent, which in our case is the root level of the graph. So notice that we're basically generating this color at 16, and then this level, which isn't doing any type of processing, but it's going to allow this output to then generate at 256 by 256. So this is just an optimization trick whenever you're going to use a uniform color like this, where it's just representing a single value, such as what we have here with this pure white metallic map. All right, so that takes care of our metallic. Let's take a look at what else we have here. Now, there's another thing that I'd like to change with this. You'll notice here that we have this height map that we created, and then we generated a normal map from this. And if we scroll down, you can see that we then added another node here called normal to height. So it's just another node that we're adding in. And I think that we can actually generate this height information that we want in a cheaper, less computational way. So we're going to do that now. So here, I'm just going to hit my space bar, grab a levels. Again, could just easily have clicked the levels button from our toolbar. Let's take this node that we generated our height map from and just plug it straight here into our levels. So at this stage, we start to get this information, or this height information, that we were able to extrapolate a normal map from, and it works very good for that. However, for a height map itself, we do have these white areas, which is good, which are going to be raised, but this black area here is not really giving me that height that I want. So in what I really want to do is I want to say that, hey, this black area is no height. So it's at this kind of like default base 0 level of height. And then we start to raise the height value as we move from black, or excuse me, this value here, which in this case right now it says black, as we move that transitionally up to white. So what we're going to do is we're going to select our levels node, and we're just going to take our output black and we're going to move it towards the output white to just lift that dark value. And the idea here is that we want to place this value, or we want to process this value so that it gives us a range of a 0 height level. And that's actually going to be 0.5. So here in our 2D view, if I click this I button, we can just sample our value. And you can see that right now, if we look at our value, we're at 0.3. So we can just keep moving this slider value. Okay, now we're at 0.4 and so on. So we can kind of use this information dialog this way. Another way to kind of do this much faster would just be to come over to our histogram tool, click this values button, and now we can have slider values where we can input precise data. So here for this level out low, we'll just double click and we'll type 0.5, and that is going to lift that range to this value that's going to equal 0 height, or kind of like that base level of 0. So this becomes our new height map, which is actually a bit cleaner than what we're doing here with this normal to height. See here, you can see that we're getting some variation that you may want or you may not. In this case, I just wanted to have it more clean like this. So here, just a little bit of a different way to handle this. So now what we're going to do is take this levels node and plug it here to our height output. And then we'll take this same height node, again, this is our process levels here, and we're going to put this into our ambient occlusion node. So you'll recall that we used this ambient occlusion node here that was derived from our height information. Now we can actually adjust our spreading, and in this particular case, this is giving me what I feel is a little bit of a cleaner ambient occlusion map here. So just a little change to that process as well. Let's select this node, hit delete, and now this is what we have. All right, so just a little bit of organization, and now you can see that this is starting to really shape up as a nice, simple, reusable, basic metal floor material. All right, so one other thing I want to talk about, or actually there's two more things. Let's take a look at this normal map that I'm using here. So one of the things I kind of want to illustrate with this, we took this height information, we hit the space bar, and we use this normal node. And if we double click, you can see that, well, we get normal information, but we're also getting some transparency into this. Oftentimes, you may not want this transparent information. So two ways to get rid of that. Number one, let's do this in a manual way. So I'll hit the space bar and I'll grab a levels. And I will take this output and plug it here into the levels. I'll then come over here to this luminance channel dropdown. We'll click this and we'll go to alpha. So now we're targeting the alpha information. We'll take our output black and move this all the way to white, and that just obliterates that alpha channel. So now this is what we get. So now let me just double click an empty area here in the graph. Again, take us to the root level so we can change our output size. And here I'm going to change this to absolute and bump this up to 1024. I'm doing this so that I could get a more clear look at the resolution here. So at 256, things just weren't, very clear for what we want to do here. So here's one way that we can remove that alpha channel. Another way, if you're using Substance Designer 5.5, I believe this was maybe in 5.4 as well, is we have a node that ships with called Normal Sobel. So let's use that. Let's hit the space bar, start to do a search here. I'll just start to type in Sobel. And you can see that there's a node here called Normal Sobel. Let's use this. So now we're going to take this height and plug it into this node. And here, let's just line these two guys up. Let's see. Let's go back to this levels here. And let's just set this to a value of 3. And let's take this Normal Sobel and let's move this to a value of 3. So let's make sure that we have the same intensities. So here is the levels adjustment we did, or this is the normal we get, and then here's the levels where we remove that alpha channel. And so this is the kind of quality that we're getting. Let me just double check. Yep, we're good here. Now, let's double click this Normal Sobel node, and now you can see that you get just a little bit of a cleaner result, a little bit more anti-aliased here around the edges and so on. So this Sobel node can actually give you a bit of a smoother, more high quality normal map. So in this case, we're going to use this instead of what we have here. So let's take this levels node and delete it. And you'll notice that our normal map here is actually plugged into our normal channel, and then it's also being used here to this curvature smooth and this levels. So instead of just manually reconnecting all these guys, a trick that we can use is to hold down the shift key, left click on this output, and then just drag and replace it to this output. So now we've replaced two outputs with a single kind of mouse operation here. So let's take this old normal node and delete it. So now we've made a new change here to our normal map. Let's grab these guys. I'll just move them in a little bit. So here's this new basic material. Let's just make sure that we save this. So here, if we come in, you'll recall that we had this curvature smooth, and then we processed it with the levels to get this mask here. And we were using this when we were compositing everything together. Well, here, let's just go back to the original node. I have it opened here, and let's take a look. So what we were doing is we were taking this mask here that we generated, and we were using a blend, and we were doing an add into this with this noise. So basically what we could do there was have this rust accumulate into these white areas of this mask. So they're basically kind of like right around the edges of these rivet shapes like this. And we still want to be able to utilize this when we look at actual blending this material with the rust in the second video that we're going to do. However, you can see that at this case, well, we don't have any rust in here, but we want to be able to probably utilize this mask later. So what I'm going to do here, I'm going to take these nodes, let's just drag them down just for visual clarity of what we're working with. And I'm going to hit the space bar here, and I'm going to come down and grab a new output. And for this label, I'm going to call this mask. And for this identifier here, we'll just call it mask. And I'm actually going to leave this usage blank. This is like a custom output that I'm creating. So let's take this output of this levels and just place it right here into that actual custom mask output node. Now, also, we're talking about grouping here. So let's look at our outputs here. And you'll recall, if I just select one of these outputs, this is my height. It has material as a group. Same thing here with my ambient occlusion, my metal, and so on. They all have this group material because these output nodes combine to create a full material. However, this output here is just, well, it's a utility. It's just a mask output. So what I'm going to do with this guy here is leave this group blank so that it's not part of my full material. So here, I will save this once more, and let's just take a look at what this is going to do. So just using this rusty metal graph that we have here already open as kind of like a scratch pad, we'll move this out of the way to an empty area. Let's grab this metal floor and let's left click, drag and drop to instance that here into this graph. Now you'll see that we have basically all of our outputs here, and then we have our mask. So if I take my graph here, we'll click this button and switch this into compact material mode, or you could also hit 3 on the keyboard. You can see that my material gets compiled down to a single output, and then I also have this little mask utility output that we can use later when we blend this basic material with other materials. So that's how that's going to work for us. So for now, we'll just delete that. Let's double click to go back to our basic material, and let's finish this up by just exposing a few parameters. So here, I'm going to come all the way up to the top of where I have my metal color, and we're going to use this as a parameter. So we'll come over here to the function button, we'll click this, and we'll click this expose option. And for the input name, I'm going to leave it to metal colors and click OK. So double click to get to the root level of my graph, and you can see here that this input parameter, metal color, has been created for me. And the label is called metal color. By default, we're just going to leave it to this iron. So that's good. That's our first parameter. Let's take a look at maybe creating a parameter here for our roughness. So here is where our roughness is being generated, and you can see that I have this blend node here. And what I'm going to do now is just select this connection line and hit my space bar, and I'll start to type in histogram, and we're going to use this histogram range node. And so we'll plug this guy in. And this is one of my favorite nodes to use when it comes to the ability of changing or the values that I use for my roughness. So you can see that by default here, the range changed just a bit. So we can just start to adjust our range here. So actually, I might pull this all the way up to 1. And that's going to give me, well, a 1-to-1 result between this histogram range and this blend. So now I can start to adjust my position. So I could start to darken this. So again, this gives the result of this looking like a more kind of shiny metal. Or we can move our position and make it even more rough. So by default, I'm going to set this here to 0.5 to control kind of like my default range for my roughness. And I'm going to expose this position value. So we'll click our function button. We'll choose expose. Now for the input name, I think I'm going to change this. So here I'll click the drop down and choose new. And in this position name, I'm going to call this, roughness underscore amount. And we'll click OK and OK to actually create this parameter. So double click to get to the root level of the graph. And let's make some changes here. So I'll click this drop down. And for the label name, I'm going to call this roughness amount. So now we have two controls. And if I want to kind of preview these controls, I can hit this little page button here. And this is what they're going to look like. So I've got my metal color, drop down, I can choose a metal type, and then I have this roughness slider, which will let me change my roughness. And this is going to work very well for taking this metal floor as a base material so that it can be reused in other graphs where we're going to blend other materials on top to create our full complex material. So now I'll just click this page button to just go out of that preview mode, and our output size, we're going to switch this from absolute to relative to parent. This is one of the final steps that we do as we finalize our work here as this base material. And so this is going to take care of this metal floor. So now we'll save, and we have our new basic material. So now we're going to do the same process here with our rust. So to get started, let's just select all of our nodes here. We're in this metal SBS. We'll hit Control-C to copy, and let's create a new substance. Again, just going to use the empty template, and for the graph name, I'll just call this rust relative to parent for the size mode, and we'll click OK. Now let's just paste in these nodes, and then we'll get to work creating our rust. Okay, so what we're going to do here, I'll just double click one of these nodes here just to generate all the thumbnails. Another way you could do that, just right click and choose compute node thumbnails. So here we have a reference here of that rusty metal node. Let's just delete it. And then we're going to start just deleting the nodes that we don't need. So here we don't need this metal node. We'll delete that. We don't need our blend. This is our color. So we're going to take this and plug this straight here to our output color or our base color. These nodes here are what is creating our color. So we're going to use those. And for now, we can pretty much delete everything else. So let's just come into here and just delete all these nodes for now. So we'll just delete these guys. And so we're going to use this noise here as our height. And you can see that we derived our color information from that. So we're going to keep that. So next, let's just start to fill in these other outputs here. Okay, so one thing I'd like to do is just kind of change this noise around just a little bit. So I'm going to double click to get to the root level of my graph. And I'm going to change this to absolute mode, and I'm going to switch this to 1024 by 1024 so I can get a really good idea of what this noise looks like. And then what I'm going to do is come over here to my generators, my noises, and I'm going to use this clouds to noise. So let's left click, drag and drop, and bring this guy into here. Now, one of the things I like about this cloud 2 noise is that I like these kind of puffy kind of areas here, and you can see them kind of collecting in this. So I'm also going to just hit the space bar here and just do maybe a levels node, and we're just going to process this value a little bit. So we'll connect this into the levels, and I'm just going to adjust my gamma just to kind of darken these areas. Let's take this output black, maybe move it up a little bit. Maybe something like this here. So just processing those values a little bit. Then I'm going to use a blend, and I'm going to blend this noise with this original noise that we had. So let's take our new cloud noise, put this into the foreground, and let's take the result of our directional warp, and we'll place that here into the background. So double click, and here's the result. Instead of using a blending mode, well, let's just check. Let's try maybe max lighten. Now, I'll tell you what, I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to keep it at this copy mode here and just use the opacity again. So I'm just dropping this down a little bit. And the idea here, you can see at 0, this is what we're getting. But what I want to do is have it to where some of this rust just kind of have some of these kind of clumping, grouping areas. And this cloud 2 is starting to give me that. So if I zoom in, you can see I'm still getting my noise, but I'm now, because of this cloud 2, I'm starting to get almost like more of like a raised kind of clumped area here. So that's kind of what I'm looking for. Maybe something more like this. So slight variation. This is what we had before here in the background, and now this is what we have. But I think this is just going to give me a better result. So now that we have this, let's plug this here into our gradient, and let's double click the color output and see what this is doing for us. Okay, so that'll work for now. Okay, so we have that in place. Next thing we need to do is start to generate our normal information. So here I'll hit my space bar, and I'll start to type in, well, I'll tell you what, let's use that Sobel node again. So I'll start to type in Sobel, and we get this normal Sobel node. And let's plug this guy in. And here is our intensity. Let's just increase this a bit. And we'll try something like, let's do this. Let's do 2 for a start. And let's take this normal and plug that, plug that there into the output of our normal. All right, next up, we're going to use our roughness. Let's move these guys down here. And this is going to work as our roughness, but what I like to always do, use the histogram range, plug this guy into here, and I'm just going to adjust my range and position. So here, I might put my range all the way up to 1 again, and then just maybe use this position as the overall kind of amount control. So let's put this at around 0.8 and plug that into my roughness. So here we go. We're starting to get this kind of shape up. We'll start to view this here in our 3D view in just a moment here. Let's just organize our graph. All right, last thing we need to do before we can really view this in our 3D view, let's set our metallic. So we're going to do the same thing that we did with that metal floor. So spacebar, let's grab the uniform color. Let's set it to grayscale, keep it at black, and we'll plug this guy into here. We are going to set this to absolute mode, and we're going to drop this all the way down to 16 by 16. And then we'll select this connection. We'll create a levels into this, and then we're going to set this to be relative to parent. So again, just that little optimization. We're using the uniform color as just solid black value. So we're going to set it at 16. We're going to use the levels to then allow that to be recomputed so it'll work correctly when we actually blend this material. So that's going to take care of our metal. And here you can see that I actually have my ambient occlusion and height. So if I were to right click and view this in view outputs in 3D view, let's see if that works. Yeah, so notice here that this is just black. And that's because we have an ambient occlusion output, but we don't actually have any information plugged into this, so the shader just sees it as black. So one of the things that we can do to kind of work around this, let's go to our materials and just do a reset. So that takes it back to this kind of gray value. And then what we can do is just take these outputs, right-click, and drag and drop them and manually assign them to the shader slot. So here's my normal, put that in the normal. Here's my roughness, and we'll put this into the roughness. And again, you'll notice we'll do metallic, but notice that since metallic is already black. So here's what we have so far. And then I can come back maybe to my normal and maybe set this to say a value of like 3. Maybe we want that to be just a little bit higher value there. Okay, so we now want to start to work with our height on this. from this grunge map. So what I'm going to do is just look at this guy. Right now, this is a bit too noisy to use as a height. So what I like to do is think about height as mainly kind of like helping me to provide more of kind of like the silhouette of the shape, and the normal is going to have the high frequency detail. So what I'm going to do here, I'm going to hit my space bar, and I'm going to do a search for blur, and you can see that I have this blur high quality grayscale. Now we want to make sure that we use the grayscale version of this. So grayscale, we're going to take this noise, which is the output of our blend, and plug this into the blur. Now I'll take this intensity down a little bit. And so now I'm kind of getting these kind of clumped regions like this, but I've reduced the noise. So here it is before with all this kind of high frequency noise, which we do not want for our height. And then here is the blur. So now that we have this, we're going to use this result as our height. So we'll plug this in, and here's our height. Let's just check how this height is working. So we're going to go to our Materials tab here in the 3D view, and then we're going to go to Edit, and underneath my scale, I'm going to start to just increase this value. And notice that right now it doesn't seem to be doing anything. And that is because the last time I did a right-click View Outputs in 3D View, I didn't have anything plugged into my height, so it's feeding that as black. And so in terms of our shader, the shader thinks, well, there's still just nothing in the height. So like I said before, we could right-click View Outputs in 3D View, but we don't have anything for our ambient occlusion. It's going to cause us a problem. So let's just right-click and drag and drop to assign this here to our height. All right, now we can go back to our edit option here for our material and take a look at our height. And now we start to get some of this parallax here. So let me just get it at kind of like an angle, and we can see that, yes, indeed, we're starting to get some of this parallax effect here for this height. Whoops, I'm adjusting the tiling there. Let's put that back to 1. Okay, so that's going to work for what we want to do. And the last thing we need is just our ambient occlusion. So let's think about how we're going to do this ambient occlusion. Let's just use the ambient occlusion node again. So I'll hit the space bar, start to type in ambient occlusion, and here's what we get. Now, of course, it's just going to use our height, so we'll just plug this in, and then we'll adjust our spreading value. So I'm just lowering this quite a bit just to get something like this. And now we'll plug this into our height. Now that we have all of our channels, we can right-click and View Outputs in 3D View, and now everything's going to work for us. So this becomes our rust texture. So I think the last thing I want to do before we finish this off is just expose a few parameters here. So let's just come over to this histogram range. Let's use this position again. So we'll click this function button and choose expose. And I'm going to change the input name. So let's use new, and we'll call this rust_amount. And then we'll click OK, and then OK once more to actually promote that to our root level. So double click to get to that root level. Here's our input parameter. We'll click this drop down, and for the label, we'll call this we'll call this roughness amount, and I will change that identifier too. Wasn't thinking when I typed that. Okay, so roughness amount. So now we have that as a parameter. And let's also take a look at this hue, saturation, and lightness. I'm going to use this as well as a parameter. So we have 3 controls. Instead of doing these individually, what I'm going to do is just click this page icon here and then choose expose parameters. And now I have this dialog that lets me do all 3 of these guys at once. So we'll click hue, saturation, and lightness. I'm not going to put these in a group or anything. We're just going to leave it like this and click OK. So now we'll double click, and here we have our parameters. Now you can actually rearrange these parameters. So notice here we have roughness amount at the top, and I may not want that. So I'm just going to come over to this little gray area of this control and just left click and drag this down so that my controls are now going to be hue, saturation, lightness, then roughness amount. And just visually, that just kind of makes more sense of the way I want to work with it. Color first and then roughness. So now I have my rust material. Double click to get to the root level, which we are already at. And let's come over here and switch this to be relative to parent. Again, that kind of final switch that we do when we're finished with our material. So now we're going to save this package. So we'll save, and I'm going to place this here into the Chapter 3 folder as well, and it's going to be Rust SBS. Save. And there we go. So now we have our metal floor basic material and our rust basic material. Both of these are just going to be base materials that we can use in any project now, as we've designed them to be reusable. In the next video, we're going to take a look at how we can add these base materials to our library.